how do I transform? I came to this world one way. I have good traits and not such good traits. In order to be able to receive the blessings and the light that I'm meant to have in this world, I need to change. How do I change?
Hello and welcome to Spiritually Hungry. Today we are going to discuss a very important subject. So
it is actually.
What if I told you that there was a book that could give you the answers to any single question that you have in life, and more than that, even questions you haven't thought of?
I'd be reading that book.
You'd be excited, right?
Be very excited.
You'd read it cover to cover. In fact, 24 volumes of this book. So today we're going to talk about the main source of Kabbalistic wisdom. It is a very esoteric, deep, could take you a lifetime to study it, and then you'd only scratch the surface. So this book is called the Zohar. And Mr. Michael, you translated the Zohar from Aramaic to Hebrew to English when you were 21. You completed it, 22?
A little bit older than that. I think I started around 18 or so.
Mm-hmm.
It took around 10 years to get the whole set, the whole 23 volumes.
That's why I fell in love with you. I was so impressed.
So that's actually what today's podcast is about. Why you love me.
Exactly.
Okay, keep it going. I'll just sit here and listen.
Well, you need to explain the Zohar, and then everybody will understand why I love you. It's really crazy and mind-blowing when I think about it, because for our listeners who don't know what this book is, even if you pick up one volume, but it's just so complex and so difficult to understand, and that's why you are the scholar. So tell us about this.
So there's a lot to say. So first of all, a little bit of the history I think is important for our listeners, many of whom I'm sure probably either never heard of this work called the Zohar, and even those who have, maybe not the importance of it. So just a little bit of history. So 2,000 years ago, during the time of Roman control, the Roman Empire control over what is today the land of Israel, they forbade study of any religious texts. And they killed many scholars and many people trying to teach. And from that upheaval, so it was a very difficult time historically. It was a time of war, of chaos, of death and destruction. And the Kabbalists all teach that often from the times of great darkness, there actually comes the greatest light. So from that time came this work that we call the work of the Zohar, or the secrets of the Zohar. Aramaic at the time was the language of the people. Everybody spoke Aramaic, the regular people. The more educated, more elevated spoke different languages, Hebrew if they were able, or other languages. But the lingua franca, the language that everybody spoke, was Aramaic. And therefore, it was important for these secrets to be revealed in Aramaic. What is the Zohar in a simple understanding? It changes the understanding of the Torah, the Bible. It changes the understanding of religion. It changes the understanding of spirituality. And if I had to...
By changes, you mean decode?
Well, it depends what you thought. Like, I think it changes the way most people think about religion. So yes, it explains the spiritual, mystical, I would say true meaning behind the Bible. There is a literal reading of the Bible, the Torah. Some people see it as a history book. Some people see it as a book of laws. God wants you to do these things. You have to do these things in order for God to be happy with you. All that type of view. And what the Zohar says, it really changes the focus and says that the entire purpose of what others might call religion, certainly spiritual practice, is one thing. How do I transform? I came to this world one way. I have good traits and not such good traits. In order to be able to receive the blessings and the light that I'm meant to have in this world, I need to change. How do I change? But first is that understanding that God or the Creator did not mean for there to be a religion that people simply follow because that's what He wants, which is some people's view, but rather that what came to be known as religion, and certainly the spiritual practices And certainly the more mystical, spiritual teachings that were going around the northern Galilee in Israel at the time, 2,000 years ago, their singular purpose was to change the focus. It's interesting, right? It's me focused, but in a beautiful way, which is it's all about me and how I need to change.
It's to make sense of each of us
Exactly.
for ourselves.
Exactly. And I would say, and give us the tools by which we can change. So it's one of the most important, and historically it changed the trajectory, certainly of Judaism and Christianity. The Judeo-Christian tradition was reignited as a spiritual path rather than a religious one followed by rote because of the wisdom of the Zohar. So that's, I would say, if you had to...
How did that happen?
Well, because what it brought to understand is that, again, religion is not the Torah, the Bible, this very important work, right? Is certainly historically, religiously, spiritually, was never meant to be understood literally. That it's all secrets, and needs to be decoded, and needs to be understood in the context of the individual and how he or she transforms to become a better person.
And why was it hidden? Why not just give the secrets along with the Bible?
Because you have to be ready for the secrets. We live in a world today where spirituality is out in the open and everybody's talking about it, almost anybody, and everybody is teaching it. But you have to realize that 2,000 years ago, the world was very different. And when the world is not as developed, it's much easier to accept religion, which is God, in a world where, science is not that developed, an understanding of why things happen. Why was it just a storm, right? We take it for granted. We see the weather forecast. Oh, there'll be a storm in 4 days, right? But imagine living in a world where, oh my God, just today suddenly the skies open up and thunder and lightning and winds and hurricanes and tsunami, right? These things happen just out of the blue. So that's why, and again, you learn more of the history. If we learn more of the history at the time, people were either originally pagan, then monotheistic, but it was a very reactive
survival.
Yes, type where so the thought was, okay, the world is crazy. We can't tell what is going to happen next. If I can just have God, this powerful force, tell me do these things, and then I'll be okay with you, and then I'll be protected, then let me go for that. So the world was not even open to a spiritual understanding of life. Certainly as we, and this is a whole other conversation, where science has taken us to a much deeper understanding of what is going around us. The world, of course, today, and really this began 2,000 years ago, but really only in the past 700 years has a deeper spiritual understanding of the Bible, of the Torah, come to be understood. So that's the answer to the question why the Bible is written originally coded. I don't want to get again, like I said, we can talk about this for a long time, but I want to really bring it down to the individual. Each one of our listeners listening, maybe hearing this for the first time. While it is true that the Zohar is a beautiful and powerful book of secrets, its real purpose, as we said, is as a refocusing of the individual around transformation, and that transformation leads to a connection to the endless light of the Creator. That's on even a basic level of reading. But here, and this is a little bit more mystical, but something that I think is important for our listeners to hear, we believe in energy. That everything has energy, that's true. But that into this work that is called the work of the Book of the Zohar was invested an energy that helps to give us clarity of vision. And let me explain that because I think it's really important. The biggest problem that each one of us has is that we don't understand why things are happening. We don't often understand where and what we should be doing.
Why we're here,
or even on a daily basis, what decisions should I be making? And the reason why we're often...
What's the meaning of life? I mean, it's those questions.
Well, those are the big questions. I'm not even talking about the big questions. I'm talking about, I'm assuming many of our listeners are already on the spiritual path. They understand why they're here to some degree. It's about change, it's about transformation. But on a daily basis, we live in a world of illusion, right? And this is something we've spoken about before. It's something science now speaks about very strongly. I was reading the other day that all of the, now we're talking about on the physical level, what science is telling us, all of the known world, what we see, the galaxies, the billions and billions of stars, trillions and trillions of stars, and endless galaxies that exist, all that is only 5% of what actually exists. Even on a physical level,
we can't even
we
comprehend
haven't even
that.
seen 95% of what exists. So this very much underscores a spiritual truth that when we wake up this morning into our lives and we go throughout the day, we're only seeing a fraction of what's actually happening, what is true. We often, I would say, live in a fog, even if we're spiritual and even if we're trying our best. And that's why, again, decisions become more difficult. What should I do? I don't understand. Why is this happening? So one of the beauties and the energies invested in this work called the Zohar is the ability to remove those veils, to remove that fog. And so much so that I would say, I know I can speak for myself, that it's impossible, and that's why I study this book every single day, these teachings every single day, because it would be impossible for me to have clarity about most things without the gift of the energy within this book that helps to remove some of the veils and then allows me to see more of reality.
So let's stop there for a second. So, because again, like we said, it's a very, very dense text and very hard to even decipher, even though it's now decoded. And I'm going to read a few samples that you actually broke down in the book Secrets of the Zohar, which I think is just a perfect example. And I picked three of my favorite sections, but there's so many. I'm curious what yours is in all of the Zohar, which we'll get to. But it's not, because we often say, even if you don't understand it, simply having this book or looking at the sequence that the letters are in, that energy is so powerful, it offers a protection.
Well, yeah, I mean, up until now we're talking about it offers a
clarity, but most people understand that clarity comes from understanding. And that's not really the case here, because there's many passages that you simply will not understand.
And I want to explain that because I think it's really important. For me, it's always important to understand things logically. Imagine you're sitting in front of a man or woman with all the wisdom of the world, right? That really understands, on a scientific level, on a spiritual level, on a historical level, everything that ever was and everything that ever will be, right? Mm-hmm. The understanding is they hold all that wisdom, and you could sit with them for hours and learn. Beautiful, and it's important. But we also believe that if they have all that wisdom, it's actually intrinsic in who they are. And therefore, simply by sitting, and we've all had this experience,
you feel
simply by sitting in the aura of this person, mm-hmm. already uplifts me, even before they open up their mouth. So,
I mean, we understand that too. Conversely, if somebody's really negative,
right,
and you feel that,
right,
you walk in a room, and
and therefore, and this is funny. I think I might have shared this. I know you know this, but when I was a kid growing up, and I was beginning to study this wisdom, I would literally sleep with the Zohar, with the volume of the Zohar, with me every night because
most people had their binky.
Well, I was a little bit older than that, but the point is, I think it's important to have a logical understanding of that the energy within the wisdom must be intrinsic within the work. So as the energy within the individual, if he or she is a wise man or woman, again, you want to learn from them, and therefore I believe it's important to study the Zohar and to read it, but it's also important to be around it, as it is important to be around elevated people.
I want to read one of my favorite passages. So we know that many, many people struggle with this. This is a perfect example of how you shared that it gives us clarity, insight on really how to behave in an evolved kind of way. So this section is the power of forgiveness to remove judgment. And just for our listeners, how many times in your life have you felt the desire to hurt someone for the simple reason they hurt you? Now, most people don't want to admit this truth, but that does happen very often. I mean, imagine a relationship, right, with your spouse or your partner or whatever. When you try to enact vengeance, even if you truly feel it's justified, you create an opening for judgment to be enacted upon you. So this section I'm about to read is from the Zohar. It's about the traveler. And in this section, he has two miracles that happen that he's not even aware of that saves him from extreme danger. The lesson's pretty powerful. So it says that Rav Abba sat by the gate of the city, and he saw a traveler standing near the edge of a cliff on a mountainside. The traveler must have been tired from travel. Everybody's traveling often. And Rav Abba watched him as the man laid down to sleep. And while he was sleeping, a snake came toward him. And then, it's not really a lizard, is it?
Like a larger snake. There's different understandings of exactly the second animal.
So another reptile suddenly appeared and killed the snake. When the traveler woke, he saw the dead snake and stepped back from the cliff. And just then the cliff was torn from the mountainside and fell to the valley below. And the traveler was saved. If he had awoken a moment later, he would have fallen to his death. So then Rav Abba approaches him and he said, I want to understand, what is it that you do or have done in your life that you were saved from death twice in a matter of minutes, that you had these miracles? So the traveler replies, in all my days, I forgave and made peace with any man who did evil by me. Evil. If I could not make peace with him, I did not sleep on my bed before forgiving him and all the others who had aggrieved me. And I did not harbor hatred for any harm that had been done to me. And moreover, from that day on, I tried to do kindness by them.
And that's even more. That's a higher level.
Even higher. So there's 3 levels there. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I think it's important to delineate the levels.
Right. So the first is he'd make peace before he would sleep with any
people who
had wronged him. The second part is he wouldn't harbor hatred for them for the harm they've done. And the third part is that he would try to awaken kindness or do
out of his way to
do good things for them. And that is what changes a person so fully and completely.
Well, again, that's what draws miracles, right? Because he was going against his nature, right? I think that's one of the important lessons here from that section in the Zohar.
Mm-hmm. What's one of your favorite sections?
So I was going to share, actually, there are quite a few, and I think it goes to...
But I do love that one, because I think people kind of ruin their lives because they get stuck in resentment and blame and trauma and sadness, and they just get stuck there. And it's really not, then who do you punish over and over again? Is yourself, right? I know it's hard to forgive and it doesn't make the act right, but in this section, he's not talking about the person that did, it's not even about, right? You're not hearing any story about this person that did me wrong or that thing. That all he's saying is that my response to these things is this. And that's really the teaching, right?
And one of the things which the Kabbalists speak about, which I think is really important, that section you just read can be read as a lesson, as you just shared beautifully. But there's also the understanding that within the words of that section is the energy to allow me to live that lesson as well, right? So it's not just the lesson that we learn. So I would often tell students, if you're having trouble forgiving, read this section every single day. And you'll see that the power isn't just in the lesson that you learn, but actually intrinsic in those words is the energy that you need to be able to live the teaching, mm-hmm. which I think is one of the beauties and the powers of the Zohar, is that it doesn't just teach us, it does a lot of teaching, but it also has inherent within the words and the teachings, the energy to actually live those teachings.
Right. So it's like a prayer you say again, or a mantra.
It's like a meditation.
Like if somebody were to imagine, and a lot of people have many mantras, right? They create, but these words and this sequence and this language, actually, it's not something that's intellectual. It's something that is like a spiritual surgery that happens. Right.
So some of my favorite sections, stories, lessons in the Zohar have to do with the person who revealed the light to the Zohar. His name is Rav Shimon Bar Yochai. So much so, by the way, the Kabbalists teach that just saying the name Rav Shimon Bar Yochai has energy that awakens light.
Well, then I'll say it too, Rav Shimon Bar Yochai.
There you go. A little bit of the history, I think it's important. So his teacher was a great sage. His name was Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva, again, lived during that time of Roman control. And there was a decree, as we mentioned earlier, that you were not allowed to teach. Certainly you were not allowed to gather people around you to teach. Rabbi Akiva, who was a great leader at the time and a great teacher, said even though, and by the way, if somebody was caught teaching or gathering students around him, he or she, mostly he at that time, would be sentenced to death, would be killed. Rabbi Akiva continues, gathers around them students. He had his entire, and this is really a tremendous lesson in perseverance. For most of his life, he was a teacher, and he had 24,000 students. Mm-hmm. He had built places of study throughout the land of Israel at the time. it says, the Midrash, the sages say that because his students did not have enough love between them, did not treat each other with enough respect, all 24,000 of them died.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, I always envisioned, the state of mind of Rabbi Akiva. He had just lost his entire life's work. He had spent his entire life
most
teaching.
Would feel like they were a failure, or there was
or life's over.
Punishment, or what? Where do you pick up from there? And by the way, love thy neighbor as thyself is the only precept I think that matters, and it's that's the impossible
famous teaching
thing
of Rabbi Akiva, probably as an effect of learning that he taught 24,000 scholars for so many years, and it did no benefit.
Right.
Rabbi Akiva is famous for saying, "Love your neighbor as yourself" is the singular most important and goal of all what I call the mitzvot, the commandments or the spiritual path.
I mean, I think all the other commandments are set up to enable people to live that, but then people get stuck in
everything else.
Yeah.
And therefore, by the way, one of the things that I often repeat, and certainly worth repeating, is that if you want to test or you want to know whether you're actually on a true spiritual path, are you loving more people more deeply today than yesterday? Now, you can have other gauges for yourself. Am I meditating more? Am I praying more? Am I studying? Whatever. Rabbi Akiva says, forget about everything else. Unless you can answer honestly this question, from day to day, from week to week, from month to month, are you loving more people more deeply? Then you're on a true spiritual path. Mm-hmm. Anything else, no matter what else you're doing, if the answer to that question is no, then you're not on a true spiritual path. So Rabbi Akiva,
and by the way, loving more people, because I actually gave a talk last night, and this was part of the conversation, and this woman said, well, what do you mean love all people? I mean, I don't know them to love them. And she said, I have no problem with my family or my children. I said, no, that's exactly the point. If you look at all people, we all come from the same place. We're all made of the same things. We are all light internally, right? Of course, people express that in different ways. There's different levels of soul, but we are made from the same flesh, same creator. If you understand that, then you look at everybody and you say, wow, we have everything in common. But instead, what we do is we look at people and say, okay, I'm not like that person because of this, or I would never do that because they're like that. Or I don't agree with this thing. And that creates separation. If you just looked at everybody and you said, I want to see how we are more similar. I want to see how we have an affinity between us. Then you can offer love to somebody. You want to love everybody because they are you and you are them. But her initial thing was like, I don't even understand what you're saying.
Interesting. But like you said, that's in Rabbi Akiva, again, probably as an effect of losing his 24,000 students, because they were not increasing their love for each other, and certainly not increasing their respect.
It was the opposite, right?
Yes. They did not treat each other with respect. So again, he reaches probably the low point of his life where he loses 24,000 students. They all die. He then does not give up, which is a very important lesson. And he gathers around him 5 students. Mm-hmm. From those 5 students, the entire tradition of wisdom, besides what's called the Torah, the Bible, the written books, all the tradition of oral teachings came from those 5 students. And I think it's a really beautiful, again, anytime you're going through a struggle or or loss, right? That understanding is that you thought, or Rabbi Akiva might have thought, his goal in life was to be a great teacher to masses, to 24,000.
And that the masses would affect the greatest change, right?
And in reality, just gathering, after not giving up, persevering, and gathering around him 5 students, they actually, for thousands of years forward, were able to uphold and reveal the secrets, the wisdom for the world.
And by the way, what a lesson for all of us, and especially in this day and age. People think the more people see, more viewers, more popularity, more, and actually just need the right kind of thing, right? The truth.
Right. So, and Rabbi Akiva's life ends that the Romans actually catch him for teaching, and they kill him. Again, I think I've shared this in previous podcasts, but there's a beautiful moment as Rabbi Akiva is being killed by the Romans, where his students are gathered around him, and they say, how could this be happening to somebody as pure, as elevated, as powerful as you? And he says, In this moment, I feel nothing but the pure love and connection to the light of the Creator. And again, I think for me, and Rabbi Akiva in his death epitomizes where we all want to be when we grow up, right? In such a state of connection that even the most painful physical situation here, death, and his death was a terrible one on a physical level, but he felt what his experience was beautiful. And again, that's I think for me, it's a very big motivator of trying to push to be even more spiritual and grow, because that's where we need to get to. So Rabbi Akiva is killed by the Romans for teachings. His 5 students then have to go hide. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the author, the revealer of the Zohar, hides in a cave in northern Israel in a place, in actually a Druze village today called Pekin. He's there for 13 years. As he exits the cave, now he didn't have a change of clothes, the story goes, so he would actually lie in the earth with his son. He was there with his son, who had also run away with him, and they would cover themselves with dirt because they had no changes of clothes, and they would study all day. And great souls, it says, from the upper worlds would come and visit them and teach them. And that's where the light of the Zohar was initially revealed to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son, Rabbi Lazar. He then comes out of the cave. One of the first people he meets that he knows is his father-in-law. And when his father-in-law sees him, one can imagine what a body looks like, even of a live person, after being basically, underground in the dirt for 13 years. And his father-in-law literally says, "Woe to me that I see you like this." And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, "No, I am praiseworthy that you see me like this. For if I would not be like this, I wouldn't be who I am now." And there again, that the pain that he had to go through, and this is an important spiritual lesson. Maybe it's not a fun one, but the reality is, the more challenging situations we actively put ourselves in or experience with the right consciousness is what actually makes us into the great human being we're supposed to be. And therefore, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, in a very short phrase, really encapsulates this teaching. If I did not go through this challenge of the past 13 years, I would not be who I am. I would not be the revealer of these great secrets. I would not be the revealer of this great light. So there, for me, is one of the more powerful teachings of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai of the Zohar, which again, all of this is held within the words, the teachings of the Zohar. So, and again, there's many more. I one of the reasons I want to point this out, which is important because this podcast comes out on the day that the Kabbalists for thousands of years celebrate the death or the elevation of the soul of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So what I would really like to inspire our listeners is to at least open yourself up to this great work, not just, again, both parts of it are powerful. The secrets of this work, as I said, it really literally changed the way the Judeo-Christian tradition went, meaning away from rote religion to a deeper spiritual understanding, away from a historical book to a personal book of development and growth and change. But beyond the secrets, beyond the wisdom, there's also great light within this book. And like I said before, I know for myself, unless I connect to this wisdom every single day, I read a few segments, portions of it. And I do it not just because I want to learn something new, because I've literally read this work, all 23 volumes and more, over and over again for the past, maybe 30, 40 years of my life. Every time, by the way, I see new secrets, new light. But for me, it's that springboard daily to allow me to go out of the fog of the illusion of this physical world.
Because you can't really read it and not feel like a piercing in your heart or in your soul, and also feel small, but in the best sense of that word, right? I think it removes the blinders of the ego, and you stop and say, wow, as much as I think I am, or as much as I think I do, or even how evolved I think I might be, I'm not even in the playing field. I mean, truly.
Absolutely. And I do want to...
And we're so lucky to have, again, like I said at the beginning, a book that any question, even things you haven't thought of, they just open up your mind to the true reality of
Absolutely.
life.
Absolutely. It really, it transforms you, and it really elevates you out of lower consciousness or the consciousness of this physical world. I want to give our listeners a few practical things you can do. So this is a little bit self-promotion.
No, but Secrets of the Zohar is
right. So
one of the best
if
books.
you're a beginner, like I said, there's 23 volumes, which, by the way, you can get the set at Kabbalah.com, or you can look at it online, Zohar.com. But if you're a beginner, I would definitely start at Secrets of the Zohar, which is a book that I put together a number of years ago, and takes a number of the secrets with a meditation for each one. You know, of every episode that we've ever done, of every teaching we've ever given to our listeners, I can say without a doubt that availing yourself of this most powerful tool will transform your life probably more than anything else that you can do and will do. So I can't underscore enough and awaken enough. I can tell you for myself, I know that there's no way that I can continue to grow spiritually without a consistent daily connection to this light, to this wisdom that is truly transformational.
I concur.
So this is funny. This episode is a little bit different than all the other episodes, but I hope we've both shared in a way that makes this beautiful, powerful teaching accessible more.
Well, we're sharing where our inspiration comes from. Absolutely. And where we find wisdom and are able to, offer anything truly. So,
yeah.
You have a letter for us?
I do. So this is, by the way, it's interesting. The Tikkun, especially the Tikkun episodes, recent episodes, have garnered by far so much more.
Let's do another one.
Yeah, we probably should. But first, I'll share from one of our listeners. It's a good time to remind all of our listeners, make sure to send us all of your inspirations. And I'm very, by the way, interested to hear from our listeners about this past episode, hopefully how we've inspired you to at least take a few steps towards connecting to this wisdom and this tool daily. Hi there, beautiful guides. I love today's podcast talking about triggers and the power of the pause. Through restriction that I began to understand as a result of studying Kabbalah and listening to your podcast, I was able to practice it during my most challenging life moments. When we realized our son was struggling with drug addiction, I was able to pause consistently to seek the answers for the next right course of action and choice. As dark and scary as the time was, it also contained a knowing that this was meant to be happening and that there would be great things to come from it. There was no doubt that we were surrounded by immense light and love from moment one, beyond reason or explanation at the time. I simply knew how to pause and welcome the ability to begin to let the miracles happen. And they did. Our boy is now 3 years clean. And he is thriving and providing solutions and light to others on the path. We both are. The biggest turn of events happened when I started to restrict my own actions, letting go with my boy, knowing he had the power in him, and only he could be the one to choose and create the healing. Once I created the boundaries and stayed in my lane and turned the magnifying glass onto myself instead of him, he began to do the same. I wouldn't have had the word, but I do now. It was restriction in its deepest sense. Thank you for another moment of truth along the path. Much gratitude, Ilana.
It's beautiful.
Thank you so much. Beautiful. And again, I often, and I'm sure our listeners as well, are so inspired.
I just actually got a book in the mail.
Yes, it's from Ilana.
Okay, I opened the package today. That's so serendipitous. I opened it and it looks great. Thank you. Yeah, it looks really powerful.
So I know our listeners, Ilana, are as well inspired by your use of these tools, really transforming your life, as so many of us are desiring to live every single day. So thank you for sharing that with us and with all of our listeners all over the world. So again, a reminder, share this podcast with everybody you know, write 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts, continue to send us your questions, comments, stories, inspirations to Monica and Michael at spirituallyhungry.life. We hope you enjoyed listening to this podcast as much as we enjoyed recording it.
Stay spiritually hungry.